I guess let me ask you, what are your thoughts on the state of the industry now?
Back in the 90s, comics started taking a dark turn with, I guess, Frank Miller's Dark Knight. Um, Suddenly they were more violent. The stories were more adult and dark and grim. And I'm more of a humor guy. I like the lighter stuff. And it just, I kind of started losing interest around that time to where I quit reading the comics in the early 2000s. And so obviously I see comics around going to conventions and talking to fans. I hear some stuff. Today's comics are just a world of difference from the 70s and 80s and 90s, where the bulk of my career. Um, like I said, digital has really changed the look of the art. It's changed the the way that it's changed the artists that have entered the business. A lot of them are more illustrators than storytellers. So it's changed everything about the art of the comics. And then the stories are just, from what I hear from the fans, they just don't have the same, uh, I don't know, interests that they used to have. They're either long sagas that you have to buy a lot of different titles just to keep up with the storyline, or there's just not a lot of story to it. It's mostly just action. I don't know. I don't read them, so I can't really say, but that's what I hear. A lot of fans are nostalgic for the older comics.
Yeah, I know I am, because I don't know, like I miss like the story arcs that were, your classic like 5 to 7 issues, right? That you could, gather those together in like, a graphic novel, or you could just buy, that run, right? And you'd get a complete story. And now it just seems that these stories, just kind of keep building and building and building and building, because and this is what I think, at least with the big major too, is that comics have just become a way to promote the movies, as opposed to the way the movies used to promote the comics, right?
Yeah, the movies really had a big impact because that's where the big money is. Obviously, there's not that much money in publishing compared to movies, and so the comic publishers, I think, felt they had to make people who went to the movies recognize those characters when they went into a comic shop. And they didn't want the superheroes looking really different from the movie versions of them, because they thought then they would hurt sales. So they started making the costumes more like they are in the movies, um, copying different things from the movies. And they're really totally separate businesses, and each one has different demands. So I don't think that's necessarily a good idea. A costume that looks good in a movie is fine for a cover maybe, but when you have to draw it panel after panel from all different angles, all those tiny little details, it's just not sensible. There's a reason why we had more simple costumes back in the early days, because you're drawing so many panels with that figure over and over and over again, and a lot of them very small. It doesn't work to have a really complicated costume.
Yeah, I feel like with a lot of modern comics, I don't know, the panels just seem so crowded with detail, right? Like, I feel, I mean, and then this is probably just goes back to, that philosophy that less is more, right? You like you as someone viewing art, you tend to project your own experiences onto a story or onto a character. And I guess with like novelizations as well, like your imagination's always going to be more powerful than, the detail given to it. But yeah, I mean, from a practical standpoint, when you have, I mean, you just take like a boot, for example, you look at Captain America's old boot, a boot itself was just, a red boot, but now it's got shoelaces, it's got stitching. If he's like kicking, you're definitely going to see all the patterns of the sole of the boot underneath it and where it grips. I mean, it's just it's almost as if they're trying to mimic the detail of they're trying to mimic the detail of the movie, but it doesn't. I mean, you're never going to capture that kind of action with a movie in a comic book. Like you have to stick to the strengths of what the comic medium is.
Exactly. And a lot of the, like I was saying, a lot of those artists came over from illustration because the illustration market has been slowly dying, being replaced by photography and Photoshop. And there aren't as many avenues for illustrators to get work. And then they see the comic book business kind of booming. And so they want a piece of that and they come in, but they're used to doing really detailed drawings for an illustration that's going to be much bigger than a comic page. And they're not really educated in storytelling the way Jack Kirby was and John Buscema was. The earlier artists that were all about telling a story visually. These guys are more interested in making pretty pictures, and it's there's different demands. Like I was saying, comic books have certain things that you need to do to make it work as a comic, and movies have certain things they need to do to make them work as movies, and they're different things.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, I feel like with the focus not on comic books, it's it not being well being more on movies than comics. I would say. I mean, don't want to say that these publishers aren't focused on their comics. They definitely are, but as a money making avenue, the movies are definitely where the bucks are at. And I feel with the focus on movies over comics, you're seeing less and less titles get published, and you're seeing the amounts of those books get reduced. And I fear that in my lifetime we might see, I don't want to say an end of comics as a medium, but we may see, the death of, this system that we know of comics as, annual monthly issues, and this all long going storyline, might be diminished.
Yeah, there's always those rumors that the end is near, but the end was near when I entered the business back in '74. They were saying, well, comics won't even be around in 5 years. So, it's hard to say what's going to happen in the future, whether they'll keep publishing monthly comics, whether Marvel and DC will be relevant the way they are today, with so many new publishers. Graphic novels have taken a big foothold. The business is constantly evolving. Now you have books online in digital format instead of just print format. Um, there's web comics. So who knows what the future is going to hold.